Hi, my name's Pharaoh, and today I want to. It's probably not going to be a very long stream, but I just want to kind of talk about and discuss and just generally think about settlements. And I've come to my. This was the After Titan save, and this is the settlement I ended up going to. Some people may remember I found one that had Fecium, I think it was, as its main thing. I can't even remember what this one was, but it wasn't Fecium. Come on, let me in the Viking people. I don't know if I've even got to the point where it's making a profit to see yet. Doesn't really matter what we do here. Nobody's going to do anything, but let's do that one. That's one of the considerations, actually, how this kind of thing is implemented, how these decisions are implemented, and just generally how settlements work. No, I still have too much debt to even know what is going to go on here. Hi, Ignition. Good to see you. Good morning. No, good afternoon in my case. So this is a very nice, I think it's paradise. Let me just double check. Yeah, a paradise giant. Marrow Bob, that's what it was. I was thinking it was Fecium. No, this isn't the Marrow Bob settlement. This is a different settlement. I don't even know what it is yet. I need to be out of debt, and I'm not out of debt. I claimed it. I didn't do much with it. I've not been playing this save, but it was the quickest save I could get a nice screenshot of for the thumbnail. And it's a nice purple paradise planet. So, and I called this settlement Shield Wall because it's got a massive wall of cliffs around it, which is quite nice actually. I quite like that. And there's some caves over here where if I was going to spend more time in this save, maybe I'd build my base just in this cave. Oops. Forgetting that I don't really have a great jetpack on this save. It's kind of a nice view from here. It's a nice purple lush. I can't remember what the geography was like on this planet. I think it was quite open for a giant, because that other one I was on before, the other giant paradise, had like lots of mountain ranges. And this is just wide open, I think. Does it look like it's got some water? Yeah, it looks like it's water over there, yep. The other one didn't have any water. All in all, quite a nice planet. So one of the things I always think about when they talk about settlements. Yeah, this isn't my discovery even talking about. Where's my social stream not working? Hang on. That's better. I haven't got it fully set up, but I can't put the comment on stream, unfortunately. It was discovered 1 month ago by GZ Morales, and this is in, if you remember, my After Titan save kind of hung around that area, so most of the stuff was slowly being explored and expanded upon by others, not just me. Yeah, I don't want to go to photo, I want to go to the galaxy map. And they marked it Colossal Paradise, so I thought, oh, that'd be an interesting place to have a look. But it's very close to a lot of the places I was exploring in my After Titan save. Hi, Grimy891. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, it's a nice place. Space is very blue here, isn't it? It's almost like Have I just not got out of the atmosphere yet? The atmosphere on these giants have strange... It looked like I could have shot some asteroids while still in the atmosphere. It's very interesting. Let's go back down to the settlement and explain what I'm thinking about and why I'm thinking this is an issue now. I might switch to another save as well, because we can look at how settlements develop. Haven't got a landing pad here yet. Haven't got anything here yet. Let's land under this tree. There you go. So this is an early settlement. I haven't done anything with it. I've got a few sentinels buzzing around because I think Tracer Metal is trying to start. But as you can see, there's not many buildings here. I haven't really developed it at all. How many settlements are there per planet? No, there are dozens and dozens. I would guess on a giant like this there could be even more, but it depends if they spread out the points of interest or not. This is evidently a Viking settlement because it's stone. Each settlement has its own architectural design based on the race. So interesting that they have the sails on these. Because one of the hallmarks of a Gek one is that they're all made of wood and they very much seem to be based around their maritime tradition. I don't believe the Viking had a maritime tradition, but they've still got these sails here. I just want to try and avoid these things. Now, one of the things that you'll notice in settlements, I don't know if we can easily see it, is that there are large patches laid out for the expansion of the settlement. And if we... Let's just put that up as well. Yeah, I agree. I do think they need an overhaul. But we need to discuss what that really means and why they haven't, and what really needs to happen. How does it impact various platforms? It looks like I'm developing something over here. So this particular building, for instance, that I'm building here, it's the commercial repository. This has been placed in a position where it would always have been. So when I said, oh yes, I want to build that, I chose between two buildings. It always knew it was going to be here. And it's set by the seed as to where each of these buildings are. And then they kind of get positioned around based on that seed. And every settlement will be different. It needs rendering. It's a bit like a base. It has lots of build parts. You'll recognize that each of these build parts are the same as we have access to. These buttresses, for instance, and these flags in here, they're all build parts that we can build with. And that's part of the problem, I believe, is that, yes, they've tried to make them procedural. They've tried to make them very feeling lived in with these parts littered around. But that's what makes them hard to render on platforms like the Switch, which wasn't a consideration when they first brought out settlements. And why, when the Switch came along, they didn't include settlements, because they were finding it very hard to render these large bases. This has already probably got a few hundred build parts. One of the things that I've been thinking is, would we put up with a complete overhaul to the point where they were no longer quite so procedurally generated? And the reason I'm thinking that is because if we go to a space station, for instance, actually I could probably just use the, rather than incur the wrath of the Sentinels, I could probably just go to one on the teleporter. Let's just go to a random space station. I've gone to an abandoned space station. That's really not helping. Actually, while we're here, I'll explain what I mean though, because you remember the older space station? Now, this is the really old space stations, but space stations, as they were previously, had a section on one side of this runway, and then we could just about get across without landing on the floor to the other side of the runway. But we could often not really see the NPCs on the other side. The distance was rendering wasn't great, and we definitely couldn't see the booths that were beyond even that. We would actually have had to have traveled across, no matter how good our hardware was. We had to travel across to start to see that rendering in, and as we approached, we start to see the booths on the other side. And then they updated space stations. So I should go to a decent one. So you pay attention to where I'm going. Okay, there. And now the rendering distance on space stations is huge. So even if we go right out to where we would first get out of our ships, we can see tiny NPCs walking around. We can see the NPCs in their booths. We put that on a full screen. We can see these guys moving around. We could even sometimes as I'm flying in, which we can do, fly in and out, I can tell that there's a traveler there, because you kind of spot it as you're coming in. And from about here, just saw it pop there, just quite a way out, you start to get this rendering. And the reason this can be rendered quite so well is because it's a bit like a map in a computer game, in that it's always going to be very much this layout. There are subtle differences between the races, but not as big as settlements. Positions of NPCs and their paths are more simple. They're not going to be randomly distributed. They're not going to be doing interesting things like running around if there's a storm or other CPU intensive things that NPCs might need to do. They just stroll around a kind of a simple pattern, not making any major decisions, not trying to look like they're doing much. And that's all a lot easier to render. So they've really optimized this entire environment to be easy to render. It doesn't really have a problem, doesn't stutter much. We can see everything from a long way out. And it's quite an impressive environment for No Man's Sky, because we generally weren't used to this kind of environment until they updated the space stations. But if they were to do something like this for settlements, we'd have to put up with a lot of compromises. They would have to say make settlements very, very simple. They would have to always have the buildings the same, maybe, or they could have them where as you enter the settlement, you go in a certain way and then it renders. So there could be like a gateway that you walk into and then it reveals the map. Or they could have it so that it only renders when you get very close and then it renders a set way. And those would be compromises. And they're not the compromises that they were making when they first brought out settlements. So the question is, would we be happy with that in order for every platform to use it? Say, for instance, Switch. But then the other question here we have is that, so when Switch 2 is coming out now, actually I'm going to switch saves. Let's jump in mode. Switch 2 is coming out now, and that may exacerbate some, or not exacerbate, it may alleviate some of these problems. But of course, some people won't be upgrading. So is it still a consideration there? Will the upgrade path potentially help with that? I want to quit to mode select. Let's go to my original save, which will have my most fully developed settlement. Hi Gravnor, welcome to the stream. We go to this settlement. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fight immediately here as well, because I don't go to my settlements very often, and that's one of the problems, is that we kind of lose interest in them after a while. Even in a save where we're really kind of trying to make use of them, they do get a bit boring and a bit samey. There's no fighting going on here. So this is also a very nice planet. I like to choose quite nice planets. This isn't a paradise planet, but this planet has nice green grass. It has diplos. I built a base nearby, but not in the big settlement, because that can be an issue. So that's my base over there, overlooking it, which I call the Overseer's House. And it literally oversees the settlement. And as you can see, it's much more fully developed. I don't think there's going to be any extra buildings. And one of the things that we discover as we're putting buildings in is that the options become more and more limited, until it's pretty much saying, well, do you want to build this last building? And so it seems like for each settlement seed, this settlement is set. So you can't ever build more buildings, and they'll always will have been in this position. I've been able to upgrade my settlement to B class, but my population won't increase. The population increase potential is quite low. We go to every encounter we get. This is a typical encounter. In this one, this case in point is basically a where we're being asked to make a legal decision. Very few of these will be ones that allow you to increase your population. Some of them will. Some will say things like, would you like better bedding rolls or something like that? And then suddenly you'll get 4 extra population, or whatever it is. Might be even up to 7. But they're very rare and far between. And so increasing your population is really slow, really hard. It takes forever. Technology merchant ties accusers value get them a strav of covertly installing security cameras in their habitation pool. Now, let's take this as an example of where I feel like settlements let us down a little bit. I don't know who either of these characters are. If I wander around my settlement, they will probably be there. They probably will have these names. But they don't really have text that gives me a feeling about what might come up in a future dispute. So if, for instance, I was walking around and I saw Lemustrav is looking suspicious, and then a day later I came to resolve a dispute and I was asked to make a decision about whether Lemustrav is guilty of something, then I would have more context. Or we could say, all right, we're being asked to make a decision. Is there a back out option? And we can go and ask some of the other members of the settlement what they think. so we can take the temperature of the settlement. That would be quite cool. It would be quite a nice idea to actually have these characters feel like they actually do mean something. In this case, there is a actual amount of money that we would get if we find them, but there doesn't appear to be any other nothing else is going to happen to my save if I was to not find him or whatever. Let's not find him, and we don't have much to go on. What does that achieve? I don't. Will people be unhappy with me if I go and chat to some random NPCs now? Will they even acknowledge that I just made this high-profile decision? No, they won't. Like, that guy's daydreaming. That guy's in good spirits in the bar. That guy's just dancing. I mean, they're great. I love these places. I really like the ambience of this bar. It's got a nice little alcove. Strangely, no barkeeper. Never worked that one out. I wonder if there was an NPC that they might have given us for the bars and they just never got round to it because they didn't want to develop it further. Running for cover usually suggests that there's a storm coming. Maybe there is, I'm not sure. Yes, so there's a storm coming. So they're reacting to certain things like the environment, but they're not reacting to my decisions. As you say, Romy, the decision-making process feels pointless. It doesn't feel like we've achieved anything. We could have arbitrarily decided, well, we just want to get some money off that guy, regardless of whether he's guilty or not. And you do often get the impression by the way it's written who's guilty and who isn't. But that's all, really. Now, a good example on this particular settlement, I was standing in my thing in here, and I could see through that back wall, I could see an NPC in there where it says desperate to hide. That guy's inside there somewhere. And instead of saying desperate to hide, it said is stealing drinks. And that's the bar. So that was quite a good piece of flavor text. But if it had told me planetary drone Sala is stealing drinks, and I noticed, and then 2 days later I had a thing saying Sala has been accused of stealing drinks, what do you want to do about it? That would suddenly feel really vibrant and alive. It would feel like the settlement really is happening around me. But it didn't take note of that. It didn't do anything with that information. And at that time, I made a video about this one because I actually ended up save editing this out. I used to have a feature which said what was the word? Something like free alcohol on tap or something like that. And that was actually capping my productivity below 1 million a day. And I could not get any higher than 1 million. And the reason I save edited it out was to test to see if any of these other things capped it, and they didn't. It went up to 1 million, and I couldn't be bothered to change it because it didn't really make a lot of difference. It was only just below 1 million. It wasn't changing my overall A class or whatever. It was just sitting just below. But it was interesting that it capped it. But I wasn't. The only flavor texts I was seeing was about drinking, were not really impacting anything else. There was just a small amount of money that it was impacting, and none of my decisions were being impacted. But I think there are a couple that might, and I say might because I've never tracked it, that might have an ongoing impact. For instance, you'll see the one where it says a stranger has come to town, and sometimes they will seem very suspicious. They'll say something like, "Oh, they're acting suspiciously," or they don't really want to go into any more details about why they're here. Do they just want to live here? or it might suggest that they have been in a war or other strange things. And sometimes those NPCs do crop up in some of the decisions, and I don't know if it's because they're supposed to be more suspicious and will cause more trouble or not. And because there's no clearer line and it's not really mentioned that they were the recent newcomer, then I don't know if that's deliberate or not. But the one time that I did see it actually matter was in my permadeath save once, where I very coincidentally was visiting the space station in the same system. And I was doing the find a fugitive. And it took me to the planet, and I asked somebody random in some other place, oh, I'm looking for this fugitive. And then it sent me to a location, and I thought, oh, this location's not far, I'll go on foot. So I traveled on in foot and arrived at my own settlement. And then the fugitive was the guy that had turned up and asked for sanctuary, and he was sitting in my bar. And that was a real kind of synergistic moment that actually did suggest there was some kind of real story going on. And I've never seen anybody else mention that or anybody else talk about that online or in a video or whatever. So it does suggest there might be little elements of story sprinkled in here, but we're not giving it the credit it deserves because we're not really noticing that there are these elements in there. So it does feel like there are things in these settlements that we're not fully aware of. I just feel that they need to tease it out a bit more. We need to see a little bit more detail. But, I mean, so those two cases, we've got the alcohol case impacting things and potentially the finding an outlaw being a thing. Well, I mean, they've got no incentive to pay attention. We have no real indication that there's anything extra going on. I'm all for emergent gameplay. I like the idea that it doesn't really tell us much. We discover it as we go along, and the story tells itself. For instance, this guy saying content with the overseer's choices. That's because I'm now running a very successful settlement. It's an A class. That kind of thing is fine. It's telling a little bit of a story. Even the architecture, as I mentioned before, that how Gek settlements are wooden, Korvax settlements are metal, and Viking settlements are stone. That's an element of storytelling. It just gives us a little bit more information about the races, the kind of culture they come from. And it's backed up by the fact that we know, for instance, that Gek are a seafaring culture. They build out of wood because they used to build their ships out of wood. And if you didn't know that, you would at least get some sense of it. Especially in this Gek settlement, you've got a lot more sails. Like I was saying before, the other one that surprisingly had sails. This one has all of the types of sails. It tends to make a big feature of them. And the Korvax settlements, very much metal, aluminium looking. That's all storytelling. All of that element of that's great. I love those elements, and I love the fact that settlements exist for those reasons. But if they're going to have these emergent features, they need to be a little bit more obvious than they are. And I feel what's happened is that Hello Games had these ideas for what the settlements could be. We immediately saw the potential, for instance, like going into some of these random buildings by the doorway. thinking, oh, this could actually be a place. I might be able to come to this thing one day and there might be something in there, or this might actually be giving me some readings, or if I go to the bar, I might hear some gossip that will be an exploration opportunity. Or where is the bar again? All of these things have potential, and I feel that they had to not do those things because it wasn't available on Switch, because it's just so hard to render these very complex bases on a much smaller platform. So the questions I have, one of the biggest questions I have is, does that matter anymore? Has it changed now? We have Switch 2 coming, we have cross-save coming. If someone is on Switch and has cross-save, would they be okay with saying, okay, I can switch over to another platform and have a settlement, and then when I'm back on my Switch using the same save, I can't access that settlement, or have a reduced version of that settlement that will only just give me the basics and not all of the extra stuff, that the potential that we could have? Is that a valid thing for HG to do? Can they get away with doing that? And also, could they get away with just simplifying the whole thing and making it more streamlined on every platform? So what do people think about that? Should Hello Games develop it regardless and not worry too much about Switch because they can always upgrade? Should they develop regardless because people on Switch can now cross-save potentially? Or should they still be worried about those platforms where the game really struggles? I'm not sure. I think we're at that stage now where they can get away with doing a bit more with these things. And I feel like they could and should do that. It's like, that's very bland, that one. It just says going to the overseer's office. See what kind of interaction we get. Rival settler is work shy, does not tell true. Friend will make good decision. Yes. So who's that rival settler? We don't know. Is that like is that even appropriate to someone that's had a settlement for many months? Or were they talking about the previous person? Pleased with their new fusion accelerant. All right, does this one give out fusion accelerant? No. So why has he got fusion accelerant? What's the story? Why are they coming in the wall? That one always winds me up. They stand just outside and they sit on this chair, and then they just come in through the wall and sit on the chair. Yes, of course they need a fishing pond. To be honest, that would be fine, wouldn't it? You could imagine a planet that doesn't have any water, and then one of the things they had was a fishing pond. I know you're making a joke, but that would be perfectly valid thing to add. Is some kind of, or maybe this is where we could have aquariums. Maybe instead of having aquariums as part of our there's fishing icon there. Look. Maybe instead of having aquariums as part of our bases, maybe this could stock up. Oh, hang on, I've got an electric storm going on here. I wonder if I'd be protected if I walked in. Whoa. We also... Hey! Gods are against me today. Somebody at Hello Games has heard me moaning about settlements. And is showering me with... meteorite showers and electrical storms. like a game of Populous or something where the rival gods are not happy with me. That's an old reference to a game that most people don't play anymore, but where were we? I was starting here. To be honest, at this point, it's all Light No Fire backward tech. So if Light No Fire has settlements, then they're developing. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think we see Light No Fire, the future of Light No Fire, through a lens of what we're seeing in No Man's Sky. So we're assuming that what we're seeing in No Man's Sky is what we're going to see in Light No Fire, because we've got nothing else to go on. And I'm not convinced that everything that we're seeing new has anything to do or is necessarily to do with what we're going to see in Light No Fire. For instance, the paleontology thing. There might be something about digging up stuff, but I bet it won't be the same. Fishing. There might be fishing, but I bet it's not implemented in the same way. Things like skiffs. They might be a reject from Light No Fire, something that they were developing and then decided not to use. I don't think it's quite as simple as everything that we're seeing is backwards compatible. There are people that are working on this game and adding things specifically to this game as part of their job. Yes, there will be a certain amount of crossover, and yes, some of the things will be quite direct translations across from one to the other, but I don't want to be that cynical about it. There's so much more room for engagement. I would like to be able to set up trade routes, more expansion of buildings, more lorry. Yes, exactly. One of the first things that I think it was just before this release, I just got that feeling from something else that had been going on, that they were about to bring out some kind of trading expansion, something that expanded trading routes or generally increased how we trade. So maybe that we would actually make things that we traded, or that we'd have some kind of extra trading element. And then when I saw settlements, I thought, oh, they've actually done that. They've actually done the thing I was thinking they were going to do. Because I was seeing things like factories and thinking, oh, so we're going to have the ability to manufacture things, and then we'll be able to trade those to specific places elsewhere, other settlements, maybe other players' settlements. But then that isn't what happened at all, and nothing happened from that. So that was one of the things I immediately thought they were doing, and that's not what they were doing. I mean, I'm not saying it's just you're specifically being cynical. I'm just saying I don't want to be the cynical person that says everything we're seeing in No Man's Sky is related to Light No Fire. Because I have seen that argument a lot, that now No Man's Sky is basically a dead game because the stuff we're seeing in this game is all Light No Fire stuff. And I don't think they would want to do that. I think the rendering technology that we're seeing is clearly from Light No Fire. I think the way they changed the lighting and the dynamic lighting, different darknesses on different planets, all of that is Light No Fire technology. Some of the changing in landscapes for purple systems is probably testing out things for Light No Fire. Potentially, I think I was having this discussion yesterday or today on Reddit. Someone was talking about cartography, because that's one of the things I've always wanted in No Man's Sky is cartography. And I feel like you would imagine that Light No Fire would need cartography because it's a fantasy game. And fantasy games kind of really do, well, fantasy in general is very much a map culture. It's part of the genre, that we look at the maps and we try and understand the maps. And so if we don't have some form of mapping in Light No Fire, I feel like that would miss some of our genre expectations. We want that to be there as part of it. And therefore, I imagine we might see some form of cartography, fingers crossed, because it's what I would most like to see in No Man's Sky, just to test out some of those ideas. But maybe not. But so I do agree that they can test some things out. I just don't want to be the person that says, "Oh, No Man's Sky is a dead game." I don't think No Man's Sky will be a dead game. Light No Fire will. No Man's Sky will be a dead game. Light No Fire will be its giant planet complement. Yeah, I think pretty much the same. I think they will be branched. They already will have branched in different directions. Yeah, I'll let you have that correction because you can't auto-correct on here. I have a different reason. At this point, there's not much left to update. We've had trade surges, new space stations, gas giants, inventory sorting, new star systems. I think settlements are next. See, I think there are quite a few things we could do, but settlements are one of them. And I feel like it's not a low-hanging fruit because it would take a lot of work. It would take it needs knitting into the rest of the game, I think. I feel like for instance, you should be looking at each of the other aspects of the game and then having a version of that impacting settlements. So let's say trade routes. Maybe settlements could be better integrated into trade routes. Maybe we could make unique items that only settlements can make, and they can only be traded in very specific places. And we actually have some kind of virtual trade route system going on where we automatically are making money by making certain goods and selling. I also have this perspective because one of the games I really like on a mobile platform is what's it called again? Need to get the name right. There's two games, King of Dragon Pass and Six Ages, and I have some kind of interest in it in that I know the guy that made those games and I get on well with him. I like it. I haven't seen him for years, but I used to get on well with him and like him as a person. And he discussed it with us as should I bring this game out. But in that game, it's a little bit like this in that you are starting with a small settlement and you make text-based choices, and those choices all have repercussions. And I'm not suggesting that they turn settlements into a mobile game, but I'm suggesting that games like that have these very, very far-reaching repercussions and are very, very complex, but just based on text and developing a settlement, having people that you chat to in your settlement to come up with ideas. These things could easily be plugged into this game. So, for instance, in that game, you would, in this particular version, we send out settlers and they can go and look for things. And the only real thing that ever happens is sometimes they come back and a few people are dead, or they'll come back with something that makes the settlement a bit richer. We never see the reward, and so we have no incentive to send them out because we're just going to lose settlers, and settlers are the only thing that we don't really have that makes the settlement richer. So we all avoid sending out settlers to investigate things, whereas sending out settlers to investigate things could be a really good storytelling element. We could send them out and they could find unique things about the planet we're on. And on that planet, we could say, for instance, they might come back and say, we discovered a new creature that was previously unseen on this planet. And they might give us a rough area of where we could look for it. and then we could go out and find that creature and scan it and have an extra creature in our system, or turn it into one of our pets if it was unique or different. Or it could just be a new variation of one of the animals that's already on our planet. And that's plugging into an existing mechanic of the game in an interesting storytelling kind of way. I mean, we were joking about fishing, but they could be a new and unique fish that they've discovered on one of their expeditions. And instead of having that element of, oh, we're just sending them out for reward and then they come back and some of them might be dead, etc., we could have this extra element of, they've discovered a new fish you can only get in this fishing location, and then you might have the incentive to go and try and catch that fish and say to other people, oh, look, I found this randomly generated fish that nobody else has got. And I'm not suggesting that everybody would love that, but it would introduce a new element of gameplay where settlements were not just this seemingly static thing. They had potential to impact other areas of the game. I think settlements are a quick answer to players wanting cities. It's been placed on the back burner for now. I definitely agree that it was partly related to the call for cities, because again, in that storytelling element of we have a small settlement and it's constantly being attacked by sentinels, and that teaches us why there are no cities, and so it becomes it's another one of those emergent storytelling elements that doesn't have to be highlighted or underlined. We just see it happen. So we build this thing, and then all of a sudden a load of sentinels come and start shooting this. It'd be nice if they were a little bit more aggressive sometimes, because all they seem to be doing is shooting this thing and then nothing really happens. It'd be nice if maybe it resulted in burning down something that we had to fix, or say, for instance, our trade thing got completely destroyed and we had to rebuild it. Those kind of things would be interesting without having to add too much extra layer on there. But as they stand, that element of it is quite good, that they are a storytelling, understanding why we don't have cities. But I do think they've been placed on the back burner, and I think the main reason they've been placed on the back burner is this element that they're not available on all platforms. And I don't think we will see further progress without them at least either coming to terms with the fact that they're not on Switch, or mitigating that by saying, well, there's a new version of the Switch out, or we have cross save and you can switch backwards and forwards. But maybe this is that moment. We get it can't have escaped our notice that more people are being included in the beta for cross save testing. That to me suggests they're getting closer to rolling that out as a full feature. And maybe they're trying to get that to roll out at the same time as the Switch 2, so that regardless of what the upgrade path between Switch and Switch 2 is, Hello Games have their own upgrade path, and they can allow you to go from one to the other freely without having the situation, say, the PlayStation had, where you could move from the PlayStation 4 version to the PlayStation 5 version, but then you were kind of stuck on the PlayStation 5 version and then couldn't use that save in your PlayStation 4 anymore. You could use the old save maybe, but you couldn't have two saves, or you couldn't migrate your saves easily from one to the other. And then the whole thing stopped working anyway, which was probably a Nintendo issue. And Hello Games probably thought, aha, we'll do our own thing. And so that's why we have this in the first place. It's my speculation. if by at least the option would be there is in relation to having cross save, then yeah, I think that's the thing. Switch really could be the hold up. I started playing on the Switch and now solely play on PS5, even with cross save activated. I can see that. I have an inherited Steam Deck, which my brother had a Steam Deck. He was really into using it, but he was so into his mobile gaming that in the end he bought a higher spec portable PC. And so he said, "Oh, why don't you borrow this? See what you think of it." And for a while, I was really into playing No Man's Sky on the Steam Deck, but I've kind of drifted away from it because I don't have many opportunities for mobile gaming. I'm usually gaming at home. If I'm away somewhere, I'm usually with people that I'm interacting with or socializing with, and I'm not really using a mobile platform. So I've kind of drifted away from using it as much. And I can see that once you've got a better option for a game, then it might become the way you interact with it and play with it. So I've covered the different examples I've seen of interactivity. I've covered have I fully covered the idea of the making it a bit like a space station? Let's imagine there was a landing pad for every settlement just outside the settlement, say here. And then the settlement was kind of in a big kind of hazy dome where we couldn't really see the details. And then we entered through a door and we could see the whole settlement. And the settlement was rendered in a very simple and generic way, a bit like a space station, so that it was always the same layout for everybody, or it didn't try to be quite so procedurally generated. It didn't quite try to be so different for everybody, which it does now, which is a laudable goal, but is maybe holding it back a bit. Because, for instance, the Switch doesn't have problems with rendering space stations, and it doesn't have that many problems with rendering the anomaly, but it does have problems with rendering things like freighters, because freighters can all be slightly different. They can all have bases on them that can be more or less complex. So is one way of doing it making this thing more stable and simple? Would we all be happy with that? I'm not sure if I would or not. I like the idea of the whole thing being procedurally generated, like everything else in the game. So I'm not sure. Does anybody else have any strong feelings about that one way or the other? That if they made it much more simple and easier to render on a simpler console, would that matter to them? Would they feel cheated out of this? Or would they just be happy that Hello Games were then prepared to develop it more? Because that could be a way of them deciding to develop it more if it was all on all platforms and was simpler. Because the very first thing I thought when I walked into the new space stations was, oh, they could do settlements a bit like this. They could make them simpler. They could make them better rendered. We could render things better from a distance. Not that the distance is that bad. That settler over there is a long way away from me. Personally, I think procedural generation is the right way to go. At least the settlements have some individuality. Yes, and that's the trade-off, isn't it? If they did do that, then we wouldn't have this really quite elegant procedural generation system. The fact that I can go into this building, well, it hasn't got a door there, so it's slightly crazy sometimes, the procedural generation. But the fact that I can go into this building, look around, pop upstairs, look to see what the what it's all like. Are there NPCs wandering around? It can feel quite lived in and interesting. Some of the houses will even have almost like bars in them, a bit like the saloon, but not. I mean, we don't do this much. Once we've explored our settlement for the first time, it's not like we make a habit of going around our settlements looking in the procedurally generated rooms. But it is very clever. That's an element I'd forgotten. A couple of years ago, on the Switch, there was a developed, it looked like a small playtesting thing that was, some people were accidentally activating, which was for building. And you would take something like a wall like this, and you would drag it along. So it'd be a wall that had a, I'm making gestures you can't see on camera, so I'll move slightly away. You could like start from here and then drag the wall along, and it would be at various lengths. And the first thing I thought when I saw that wasn't that they were making a new building system, but that they were trying to find ways of rendering these without so many base parts. So for instance, here we have 1, 2, probably 3, 4, 5, probably another one in there, 6. That's 6 individual base parts that need to be rendered. Whereas if they said, okay, procedurally generate this wall, it's going to be from here, it's going to go from here to there, and that's all one building part, the whole wall, including the top part, that would make it a lot simpler and easier to generate. So I wondered if they were experimenting with that and maybe didn't get it working. I don't know. That was just my hunch. That guy's just standing there weirdly. Thinking of the ion battery. Does anyone know if the Switch 2 version will have multiplayer? We don't know anything, I don't think. I know there is a graphics improvement, so maybe other aspects will make it over too. There's a lot of speculation that maybe Switch 2 would have multiplayer available to it. But it's just that, we don't know. And it's entirely up to Hello Games, because they could have made Switch multiplayer, but we all know that there's an overhead. And one of the problems with lots of NPCs running around or having PCs running around is you get a CPU overhead. And if the CPU's not up to it, then you're going to see a huge drop in frame rate. So just running around a settlement like this with supposedly 120 settlers, that's going to grind it to a halt, more than even the rendering of the building would do. Just those deciding what this guy's doing, why he's running, and what his text should be. And equally, this guy here and this guy here and all the other guys in this settlement. That's all CPU overhead. None of that can be optimized by which graphics card you have, for instance. So I think that's more the consideration. Kind of like the idea of merging a minor settlement, trading post, space station, settlement layout, using bits and pieces and making them uniform. Just adding some anomaly kiosks would help. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that you don't necessarily have to make them too simple. All you need to do is have building blocks that are a little bit more uniform so that it can render them more simply. But I'm almost talking myself out of that by talking about the CPU overheads for NPCs, because even if we rendered the settlement more simply, the NPCs would be one of the things that makes it harder to implement. But yeah, it's kind of what I'm talking about, is just making it a bit easier to render, a little bit easier to generate, and not have such an overhead on a smaller platform. I mean, even say the early PlayStations have a few difficulties with some of these things. I'm not sure what they're like with settlements, but they can be known to have problems with some freighters, for instance. I mean, even this save, let me go to my freighter. I wouldn't say my freighter was super complicated on this save. And I do have a lot of building parts in here, so if we quickly do a tour of my freighter in terms of showing how complex it is. Got a few building parts here. I've kind of crammed them together a little bit, so there's a local area of building parts. I've tried to make a television screen type setup where he's explaining trade stuff. And there's another guy on there explaining trade stuff. Got a private cabin, all of the different badges. Got a private cabin that makes it look like it's got like doors that open and shut, but they don't open and shut. But these ones are shut. Tried to make it so that the bed was in some curtains. There's a better curtain part now. I haven't done this for ages. I could put the curtain part up. Just tried to make this room feel a bit lived in, bit of stuff on top of a cabinet. It's mostly older parts. You could probably use some newer parts these days. So that's a little bit complex. In here, just a basic room, but with a bit of decoration. I was doing all sorts of tests in this section. I built a whole thing with illuminated lighting, and then I deleted most of it. And then I was testing, seeing about leveling these things. So this is just a test area, really. And I was building with these blocks, and I never finished it. So that's not super complicated, but it starts to get more complex upstairs. And so at the moment I'm doing with a 4090, I'm struggling to hit 60 frames per second. I doubt you're seeing any obvious frame dropping, but I'm struggling to hit 60 frames a second just because of the complexity of the base. I've decorated it, got an awful lot of plants, going down to about 55 in this room. Out here I've got a lot more decoration. I did have a bar in here and I didn't rebuild it when I refashioned it a bit. So I need to put a bar. I've got the bar itself, but I haven't taken all the chairs and tables and stuff away, so that's reduced the load a little bit. Just various rooms with different lighting. I was experimenting with different ways of presenting these rooms. Got all my different things in it. But yeah, it's struggling to hit. It's to be honest, I've seen it much worse than this. I'm approaching 60 frames per second. I've seen it drop to 35, 40 on this freighter, depending on the build, and it's quite obvious when you have spaces like this how much difference certain rendering techniques that they test out in experimental mode, especially, how much difference it can make. Well, yeah, see, that's the thing. I mean, my other computer does. I was playing quite a long while. When I broke this PC, I destroyed the motherboard. I was trying to play this save on my old PC with not even an RTX card. And it was struggling. Everything was at the absolute bottom. If I ran around this room, I would be getting 35 maximum. And that is the issue. I mean, you try to render this on Switch, and people say, oh, my Switch can't render the freighter. Well, if you tried to take this onto the Switch, it would struggle. So cross save, imagine I had cross save with Switch and I took it onto the Switch, it would probably crash because it's going to have difficulty rendering so much detail, so much lighting here, lighting out there, that in that spot where I was experimenting. I'm a little bit frustrated that it hasn't started to really dip, so I can't demonstrate my point, because today it's acting perfectly and saying there's no real problem here. 53 frames per second is fine, isn't it? And I would say yes, in No Man's Sky on a very complex freighter, 53 frames per second is probably fine. I'm not really struggling to play the game. I might complain if I was on a planet. Let's go to a planet where I don't have anything built, really. This is Phantom System, so it doesn't really exist on the map. Yeah, now it's bumped up, and so we're happily sitting in 70s and 80s frames per second, and I'm not on. This is a high GPU game. I mean, some people would play this game and wonder why they're getting such poor frame rates. Now I'm getting into 90 frames per second, 80. It's dropping 65. It goes all over the place, and the reason it goes all over the place is because the game is constantly deciding where everything is and what it is, and you only have to turn your back and look away and things can de-render and no longer be there, and then you turn around and it has to decide what's there again. See the way that grass is rendering as we're approaching it, and then if we turn our back and go the other way, then it's rendering that again. And then we can do exactly the same, and it's de-rendered all of that grass, and then it's rendering it again. So that's how the game works. So it's having to think all the time, where is everything? What are we rendering here? And that's CPU intensive. It's not just a GPU. You can't just throw a good GPU at this and expect this game to run smoothly. And so we shouldn't be surprised when they decide not to make settlements for some of the lower, well, only one platform, to be honest. Actually, I meant to go to a settlement. It dropped a little bit there, now it's got back. So you might have seen a few frame drops there. Rendering, yeah, it looks like it might have dropped a few frames, but not many. Welcome back, Ignition. So if we compare that very much virgin territory when I was getting between 70, and in fact this is rendering fine as well, and that's probably because the GPU can take a lot of the load in this room. So I'm still at a similar 69, 70 frames per second. If I was playing this on my Steam Deck in very low settings, I'd be lucky to get 30 frames per second. My C got a 2 gigabyte 1050 GTX. I play on low settings at about 20. Yes, well, that's kind of not that dissimilar to my second PC that I was relying on when I broke this one. And I think I even made a couple of videos on it because so I had to really kind of think carefully about how I set things up. I was playing on an Intel Xe, low settings, 30 frames per second locked. See, this is one of the considerations that Hello Games have always got to have in the back of their mind when they're making these kinds of decisions. Is it's not just say 7 or 8 consoles and the PC. The PC itself has got many types of iterations and possibilities. I think there was a recent tweet. His name works at Hello Games. See if I can find the tweet. I won't be able to show it because I don't have Twitter on my computer, or X as it loves to be called. Search. Yeah, Martin Griffiths, who said recently, if I can find his comment, one thing good about Twitter or X is that you can search quite well. I don't want to take too long looking for this because it's just me looking up stuff on the internet while being quiet, which would be a very boring thing to do. What else could I search for? Yeah, okay. I'm going to read out this tweet. So it's from Martin Griffiths, and he was talking on X, and he often tweets about the development of the game and especially about games, the way it's rendered. For a game like No Man's Sky, where we support hardware like Switch, which is around 6 to 7 times slower than a PS4, the release of the 5090 means that we will now be supporting a GPU scaling range potentially of nearly 500 times from our slowest to fastest platform supported. And so imagine you're trying to create a game that is being rendered on that scale, where you have to support the GPU being 500 times faster on your fastest platform than it is on the slowest platform. That's a huge range of expectations, and every person on every platform is expecting the game to run perfectly, because you're playing the game and you want to be able to, well, perfectly in that you want to be able to play it. You want to be able to come to your settlement if you have one, if you're not on Switch, and actually be able to interact in the same way as everybody else. Just want to point out this really lovely fighter here. Nice golden color, red. What we used to call a hot rod. I don't think we call it that anymore. I hope that Light No Fire will force me to upgrade to a better setup. Backward compatibility can cause coding issues. Just trying to keep everybody happy. I'd rather play a game that's limited to a high setting. Exactly, which is exactly the point that Martin Griffiths was making there, is that having to do this much work just to get everybody on the same playing field is a very, very big consideration. And Ignition basically just says, upgrade, do it now. But yes, there are some reasonable value products out there now. But, you know, compared to a couple of years ago, when you could buy, well, I want to say a couple of years ago, compared to, say, 7 or 8 years ago, when you could actually build budget gaming systems, it's very difficult now to build something that will definitely run the latest game. Luckily, No Man's Sky isn't the latest game. I mean, yeah, I'm continually impressed by how well the PlayStation runs this game, considering how well it runs on other platforms, like, for instance, my PC. They do a very good job of optimizing it. So anyway, I think I may have exhausted the subject. I can't think of many other avenues to talk about in terms of how settlements can be implemented or upgraded. I mean, there's probably lots of ideas we could come up with as to ways we would like it to be better. I have suggested specific. I've sent an email, not an email. I've sent a Zendesk suggestion about the bar. I would love it to have a rumor system, a little bit like I was talking about earlier. I'd like to be able to come in here. There'd be a barman here, and he's an interactable NPC, and it'd be a bit like a mission board in a space station. And you would say, have a list of 5 rumors as opposed to missions. And the rumors might be things like, oh, there's a trading opportunity in another settlement, or there's a mysterious creature, or there's something strange going on at the local abandoned building, or all sorts of possible leads for story and exploration. And then you would, like I said before about a creature that isn't in the normal catalogue, would be an ideal thing for this. You'd say, oh, there's this strange creature spotted near the trading post just to the east of us, and if you go and investigate, you may or may not find that creature, because the rumor may or may not be true, but you're at least being encouraged to explore the planet around your settlement. Or you could send out a party to do something similar. You could say, send them out to investigate, without that just constant threat of, oh, and 5 of them died. Yeah, this is always the problem with PCs that get older and older. Like my one behind me now, the one before the one behind me now, just eventually just started dying, and I couldn't play anything on it. Yeah, kind of side missions, but there used to be in tabletop role playing, there used to be this quite clever system of rumors that we used to use, where you would just have things that may or may not be true, and there would even be a consideration. It would tell you how likely those rumors were to be true, but they were just seeds for the GM could then have little stories they could tell that were side stories in your game. And you could do similar things here, where you just encouraged a little bit more taking the planet around you a little bit more seriously, and it would be the perfect place for it. And you wouldn't need to implement it in quite the same way as missions. There wouldn't have to be quite so serious because they're just rumours, but they're kind of little things going on in the system or on the planet that's around you, or even in neighbouring systems. But just interesting little tidbits, things that the game doesn't really encourage you to do currently. A little bit like trade surges. Before trade surges came out, then that would be the perfect thing. You'd say there's a nearby system that is buying X products for a lot more money than usual, even if it was a very specific product that you could only get or make or use, or maybe it was the thing that your particular settlement makes, whatever that is on this one. I can't remember now. So it's kelp sack, which I actually quite like having kelp sack, or mesh decouplers. If they said there's a really good price for mesh decouplers in a nearby system, in a nearby purple system or a nearby blue system, and it just encouraged you to just go and have a look and see how much money you could get from my 999 mesh decouplers that are sitting there that I'm never going to pick up. I've just got the wrong one. That's the one I was looking for. Hey Alphas, how you doing? Good to see you. I think I've nearly finished this topic, but good to see you. Whenever I'm at my settlement, I usually finish off by going up to my my overseer's base, because it's usually where I make the save. I don't like to save in my settlement, even though I do have a save point sitting there. I made a small change to this the other day. You put these lights in so that they've got illuminated stanchions, as it were. So I will sit down at my nice cozy chair next to my glowing gas fire, and I'll say thank you very much for watching. Travel well, and goodbye for now.